I'm interviewing Dudley Connell on May 9, 2000. Okay, okay, Dudley, we're taping. And you know, one of the things that's a focus of mine, I mean, I'm writing broadly about that eternal debate about tradition and commerce and what have you, but I'm trying to write about some things that haven't been written about, at least at length. And one of the things that I've latched on to doing is talking about the Rounder record story. And I've spent a lot of time with Ken and Bill and Marion up there in Boston and putting them on tape and people that's how I got to you. So I've heard a little bit about your connecting with them, but why don't you tell me your story, first of all?
Well, you know, we met Ken, it was a bit in the late 1970s, probably about 78.
Mm-hmm.
We used to play all these little bars around Washington, and at that time, you could make your living playing bars around D.C. There were enough of them that you could play enough different ones that it wasn't a good living, but
you were 25 though, right?
Yeah, I was a little younger than that. I was probably about 21 or something like that. And one of the reviewers for Bluegrass Unlimited magazine, his name was Walter Saunders, and he had kind of befriended us, and he knew Ken because he did the Johnny Wisnett record with Ken and had written liner notes for the Bailey Brothers' Early Days of Bluegrass record and a couple of other things. And Ken, when they used to come to town, they would stay at Walt's house, sleep on the floor or whatever, you know, and just kind of hang out with him. And Walt said, "You got to hear this band. You got to hear this band." And Ken had probably heard it a million times. And I don't know how interested he was, but he was interested enough to come out. He and Hazel came to this honky-tonk we used to play called Susie's. And I had met Ken just to say hello to him when they used to sell records, like at the National Folk Festival and things like that. So I knew who he was when he walked in. It was pretty intimidating, though. You know, I mean,
Did Walt tell you he was bringing him in? Or?
Well, he told him that he was going to try to come, and when he actually showed, it was very exciting. It's kind of a rush to have someone there that had produced records that you learned to play music from, you know. And so Ken really enjoyed us, it seemingly so, and invited us to come to Boston to play for the other two partners, Bill and Marion. Mm-hmm. So it was probably about 4 or 5 months after that initial meeting that we went to Boston and played at the Boston Bluegrass Union's show in Cambridge at the Old Stone Church. And it was, you know, it was very exciting, and we started recording for Rounder in late 1978, 1979, something like that, and recorded, I don't know, 9 albums for him or something.
Now, where'd you stay up in Boston? Did you stay with Ken?
No, actually, we never got to stay at the old house, the Summersville house.
Yeah.
I've been there, but I never stayed there. Now, because Larry Robbins, our bass player at the time, his sister lived just outside of Boston, a town called, I think it was Abingdon or something like that, and we used to stay up there with her,
Yeah. Now, were you getting approached by other record companies? I'm wondering why Rounder, why not County, why not Sugar Hill, which had just started up.
We wanted Rounder. We had recorded an EP on Copper Creek Records, and I always thought that Rounder had the coolest covers, the most extensive liner notes, and at that time, I just thought that they had this hardcore stuff, you know, the real traditional meaty stuff, and that's the stuff that we were really interested in, and so we never even approached another company. We wanted to work with Rounder.
You were generating attention around D.C., though, weren't you?
Yeah.
Were you approached by anyone else?
No.
Okay.
No one but Copper Creek.
All right. Yeah. Marion thinks she saw you at Susie's, by the way, but it might have been up north. Your memory seems a little clearer than hers. And Hazel will confirm whether that's true or not when I see her tomorrow.
I don't remember. Thursday. I remember meeting Marion in Boston.
Okay, well,
pretty sure about that.
But in any event, that's not my point. She was, and she's described this to me very effusively. She was very struck by your show. And I'm wondering who were your visual models? Where'd you pull that from? Not your musical models, but why? You know, the outfits and just the the trio around the mic, and
well,
where'd you see the stuff?
We didn't. You know what we did is that, you know, we read about it. We studied it. You know, I mean, we were like amateur ethnomusicologists. I mean, we really, you know, we read books about it, magazine articles. We collected old, scratchy live transcripts and live tapes. And the thing that really, at that time, in my early 20s, and being just totally consumed by the traditional music, traditional bluegrass in particular, the thing that I really loved about it was the energy, you know, especially on those live tapes when you took away all the production and all that stuff and you just put a band out there in front of people. That stuff was on fire, you know, and we kind of patterned our shows after those live shows, like of Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs and the Stanley Brothers, where they'd come out in a, you know, now here's Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs and Foggy Mountain Boys, hey, you know, the fiddle would just be right there, and just boom, 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 2 or 3 songs, and I think just being young and excited and just wanting so bad to do it, you know, was probably as much of it as anything.
What were your, you obviously you listened to bluegrass. I know you listened to a lot of Ralph Stanley. What else did you listen to? You're not a country boy. You're not a southern.
Well, you know, it's funny. My parents were country bluegrass aficionados. Yeah. They loved it, and they had 2 or 3 Stanley Brothers records around the house and a couple Reno and Smiley records. And I heard it when I was a child through them, and also around our area, you know, the country gentlemen would play carnivals and fairs, the Osborne brothers and people like that. But in the, you know, when I became a teenager, well, probably a little before that, when I got to be 10 or 11 years old, I started listening to the music of my peers. You know, I liked the Beatles and the Stones, and then from that, you know, I got into the sort of blues-based English bands like Cream and Led Zeppelin and you know, and Hendrix. Right. Not that he's English, but had 2 Englishmen in his band.
Spent a lot of time there too.
Yeah, that's right. And so and then the disco thing started happening, and I really became very disillusioned with what was going on in rock music, and I started listening to like John Prine and started. I discovered Bob Dylan, and I started listening to a lot of that stuff. And really, it wasn't too big a step, really, from Neil Young and Bob Dylan and John Prine to bluegrass, because, you know, they had banjos on the records occasionally, and sometimes you'd hear a fiddle there and things like that. And I think that it was a connection. You know, I sort of like, oh, you know, my parents, you know, had listened to music something like this, and I started digging deeper and deeper, and I discovered WAMU in Washington, and I, you know, would wake up in the morning and I was turning my radio, because I was really into music. I just loved music, period, all kinds. And I was tuning the dial before I got out of bed in the morning, and I stumbled onto AMU, and, you know, Jimmy Martin's on there, something like that. And I thought, God, this is pretty good, you know, because it was pumped up and raw, like the rock and roll that I like. Because I never liked the real refined stuff. I like that real gut bucket stuff. Yeah. And it was like the blues that I like, you know, Johnny Winter and people like that. Just real raw, emotional, straight-ahead band recording kind of stuff. And the big turning point for me was in '74. I went to, and I was playing guitar at this point. You know, I'd play folk songs and Dylan and Woody Guthrie and John Prine and stuff like that at parties and, you know, hanging out around. And I went to Ralph Stanley's festival in McClure, me and a couple of friends. And I knew who Ralph Stanley was and had heard his music, but had never, you know, really listened real closely to it. And we went down to this festival, and this festival was at the top of a mountain. It's a place called Smith Ridge in the southwestern corner of Virginia. And I mean, it's really in the country, you know. I remember winding up these hills to go to this thing with cars down along the sides of the mountain. I mean, it was the real deal. And we pulled into this park after about a 9-hour drive, thought we'd never get there, thought there was no way that there could be a public event in a place like this. And there's this old guy, you know, taking tickets and chewing tobacco, you know, and I'll never forget, we pulled through the gate after we bought our tickets, And Ralph Stanley started singing "The Man of Constant Sorrow." It was coming out of this holler, this music that just floored me. And I'd tell you the truth, it was like a religious experience, a life-changing experience for me. And I went down to the foot of this holler where they were playing, and I just didn't move for 3 days. I didn't eat or anything. I mean, I was just totally just consumed by it. And I just sort of dedicated my life to it at that point.
Well, you were all primed to become a latter-day folk revivalist bluegrass musician, which is not what it sounds to me. And yet you became something that was viewed by the community as something else. How much did you guys concentrate, self-consciously say, we want to emulate an older traditional style? We don't want to look like, I don't know, the Greenbrier Boys, which I don't mean to criticize, but it's a different aesthetic, a different...
Our thing, you know what, I never really given a lot of thought. The only thing I could say about that, Mike, is that we played the music that we loved. We got hooked on this stuff, and what's really amazing is not that I fell in love with this kind of music and wanted to do it, or Eddie Stubbs fell in love with it and wanted to do it, but the fact that 5 guys, basically from within 50 miles of each other, that played the right instruments and sang the right parts, all wanted to play that kind of music. It was a uniform decision,
Yeah.
And how that all got started was, me. I started going to open mics, and playing, and other musicians would come by and they'd say, "Well, I play a little banjo," and and the band just sort of formed very, very informally, and we played for free at these, open mic things around town until we actually found a band that actually people were interested in actually hiring, and it sort of grew out of that.
Right.
But no, we weren't trying to. It was never one of these kind of things. Well, I want to try to sound exactly like this record or that record. It was just kind of, that's the stuff that we loved, so that's the stuff that we played. But we were hard-headed about it, though.
Were you familiar with other components of Rounder's catalog, other than just like the early days of bluegrass and things like that?
Well, that's the stuff that really kind of rang my bell.
Yeah.
Because I dug through that stuff looking for material.
Yeah, okay.
So Rounder was a pretty important source of repertoire for us. And actually, we recorded a lot of that stuff.
Were you ever pulled towards, it doesn't sound like, but I got to ask, because, Rounder also had this whole other side, Country Cooking and Breakfast Special and Tony Trischka, all of which got sort of, it's still, if Tony Trischka makes a record, it's like BU feels compelled to review it, but I don't know if anybody wants to anymore. And I'm wondering if any of that ever enticed you. Or
not so much at that point in my life.
Okay.
It wasn't until probably maybe 8 years, 10 years later that I started opening my mind to different kinds of music. I was pretty much a traditionalist, and and kind of turned my back on a lot of really, really good music, which I have since rediscovered.
Sure. Ken's, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's listed at least as co-producer on all of the JMB records, or most of them. Now, what role what did he bring to the studio, to the band? He's not a musician. He's got a good ear, I think. But how would you describe Ken as a producer for the JMB? Ken
helped a lot with material, and he helped, basic production stuff. That's a good song, that's not a good song. That's out of pitch, that's in pitch. This could use backup here and there. He actually was quite an orchestrator,
really?
Especially on the earlier records.
What do you remember any songs that Ken might have brought to you?
He brought Hazel's tune, My Better Years. He brought that. He brought, trying to think of some of the earlier records. I can't remember really.
Okay.
If I sat down and looked at the records, though, I could.
Yeah. Okay. Did the band ever get involved in promotion with vis-a-vis the label? Work with Rounder vis-a-vis marketing, radio promotion?
In the early days of Rounder, there was very little of that.
Right.
I mean, they did work themselves by getting stuff to radio stations and getting them into stores, but later on, actually, I really noticed a huge change when we did the Blue Diamond record.
Right.
There were interviews set up in just about every city that we went to, and with radio people and newspapers and things like that, and it really did change a good deal.
That was done through Rounder's promotion?
Absolutely, all through Rounder. Yeah.
And was that the first time that it happened?
That I remember.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Did they ever talk to you about just the whole business about hew into that traditional line, or do you want to deviate from it on this album or anything like that? Did Ken or anyone there ever talk to you about wanting to change albums somewhat?
You know, we kind of started wanting to experiment a little bit.
Uh-huh.
We started including more traditional country songs like Webb Pierce songs and Jimmy C. Newman songs and that kind of thing. We started putting some of that stuff in, and Ken was really encouraging. Ken. Another thing I could say about his hand in production, he told me once that he hated those Little Darling songs, those songs that said Little Darling about 500 times in them, and I liked them. And I told Ken that I did, and Ken said, he'd go, so you know what, I think there's enough of that kind of stuff. And actually, I really do feel that he was right. And I believe that he kind of raised the bar on what's acceptable as material in some ways. I mean, the song had to have, couldn't just be a throwaway piece of music. It had to have a bit of substance. And it took me a while, personally, to get that through my head, that was, well, you know what? Yeah, that is a good song, and that really is not a good song, although it sounds pretty good. Lyrically, it's pretty weak.
Well, I was going to ask that next, and you anticipated it, perhaps. Were you interested in words?
Not real early on. If it rhymed really good, I was happy.
Okay.
but no,
if it just sung well.
Yes, exactly. And if it had that sort of lonesome, mossy sound, then that was enough for me. And Ken's one of the first people to really make me aware that, a record shouldn't have but so many Dead Mom songs on it, that kind of thing,
And did you ever get to know Marion and Bill very well?
Not terribly well, not terribly well, unless it was a problem. That's when when I get involved with Bill or something like that.
What kind of problems would arise? What would happen?
Oh, maybe a question over royalties or some kind of thing like that.
Right. Okay. That would be Bill's bailiwick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What? And I'm not sure if this has changed one way or the other nowadays. What was a great seller in 1985?
I think Ken told me one time if we could sell 20,000 copies of a bluegrass record, that was a pretty decent seller.
Okay. Does that hold true for Longview Records today, or your duet record, or do you know where the bar?
I'm sure it's higher, but I really couldn't answer that. That would be a better question for those guys.
Okay. When you broke up, which you never did, but I guess you eventually did. When you broke up in 88, there was that Rounder press release, which I've got here, which got a lot of attention in the press. Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, that was a pretty tough pice of paper right there.
Yeah, I got it here. I'm wondering, and it generated some, it was kind of an attack on the industry in a way.
It was. You know what? Ken has always been very, very emotionally involved with just about any artist that he's ever worked with, I think. And I don't know if that's still the case so much, but all through the 80s, you could be the greatest player in the whole world, and if Ken thought you were an asshole, he wouldn't be interested in recording you.
Yeah.
He wanted people that he liked, people that he could work with and be comfortable with. And, that was written from the heart. Yeah. That wasn't written with a business in mind, because that was a bad business move. He was written from a very, very emotional place in him.
Right. Often leaving the field to amateurs. Amateurs or tired old war horses, thereby condemning much of his label, much of his catalog.
I caught a lot of hell for that.
Did you really?
Yeah, we really caught a lot of flack for that. We really made some enemies, I think, for a while.
Okay.
And that was hurtful to a large section of the bluegrass community, because a lot of the industry's full of guys that have been playing it all their life.
Yeah. But another component of that incident was some really heartfelt comments from you and Eddie in the Post article just about the finances of bluegrass, which weren't condemnatory of anybody, but were just speaking of a general situation.
Right.
How do other guys make it? How does a JD Crow carry on?
Well, for one thing, the industry is a lot healthier than it was. At least my experience since that time is that you actually can make a living in this music.
Okay.
But at the time, you know, when we started the JMB, we were in our 20s. Eddie was in his teens, you know, and not even out of high school yet. I think when we maybe just out of high school we did that first record, and we didn't need any money.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like living off love. You know, I mean, that's kind of the way it was. We didn't have any responsibilities, and in that 8-year time period that we played together full time, you know, we had mortgages, we had children, we had physical responsibilities that needed to be met, and we happened to live in an area where things are pretty expensive, and also, and I think I may have actually said this in print too, is we have a lot of opportunities open to us.
Right.
I mean, if you're born in certain parts of the country, you know, you work in a factory, you work on a farm, you move, or you work in a coal mine, or your choices are more limited than if you live in a major metropolitan area where there's all kinds of jobs and things like that around. So we found ourselves in a place where we weren't terribly happy playing together anymore.
Right.
You know, we kind of burned out. We had really kind of burned ourselves out because we worked so much to try to scrap by, and it felt very discouraging to us. But things have changed, and I've noticed a lot of change in the last 4 or 5 years.
Now, did you have children when you left? I know you have kids now. But
Yeah.
You had them in
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I had one.
Okay.
I had one. I have 2 now.
Where are the opportunities coming from now that are different? Are they the same type of opportunities? Are they different, different types of opportunities, but just the same but more, or different types? You get bluegrass into other spots?
Yeah, you know, we played at Carnegie Hall a couple of times. I mean, that would have been a pretty strange thing to do in 1980, you know.
Well, yeah.
And we played at Wolf Trap, and you know, and the market seems to be more open to bluegrass music, just the general folks. And we've noticed a kind of a shift in the audiences. The audiences aren't all country folks and folks that live in rural areas anymore. And you know, it's probably a pretty equal mix between, you know, just folks from cities and folks from the country.
Well, you know, I spent the late 70s and the 80s. I saw, in fact, the only time I saw the JMB was at what I believe was your first California show, and I remember the time because it was a month after I got married. I got married in September of '87, and I think, does that sound about right?
That does sound about right.
Yeah, and I believe at the time it was, I wouldn't have known it, I wasn't tracking your schedule, but I believe it was said this is the first time in California.
I believe that's probably about right.
It was in Santa Cruz, California, and I was a casual bluegrass listener, but bluegrass in California was, in the 80s, it was a hippie thing. It was let's get stoned and go hear some grass. And, you know,
it may surprise you that the first festivals, now I told you about that thing at Ralph Stanley's.
Yeah.
And that's the first, like, serious, that's when I went to listen to the music seriously. But where I lived, in the early 70s, we used to go to these festivals for the same reason, me and my buds.
Uh-huh.
And it was a party. You know, it was kind of, it was kind of like what happened. It looked like what happened to me was after Woodstock and Altamont and all that kind of stuff. You know, you couldn't put on a rock festival in the United States. They'd get an injunction against you, you know, because people were afraid of the, you know, property damage and all this kind of stuff. So they started putting on bluegrass festivals and bringing some rock acts. Well, I wouldn't say rock acts, but like Nitty Gritty Dirt Band and Earl Scruggs Review, which was plugged in and drums and everything. And it was, that's what we used to do, you know, the same kind of thing.
Oh, as entertainment.
Yeah.
The JMB went another direction, of course.
Oh,
So
yeah. Yeah. The Ralph Stanley experience changed that for me.
Did the JMB play those types of shows at all once you got going? Did you?
They were kind of dying out by then.
Okay.
We may have played, I take that back. We played Molek, Wisconsin once, which was on an Indian reservation, and people were ODing and stuff.
Yeah,
it was just absolutely bananas. And we played this place in Ontario, in Canada. It was also like that, just a huge crowd of young, semi-clad folks, but it was really fun, very exciting, you know.
What's helped the scene grow? What's changed in the 12 years since '88? Why do you think there's more opportunities? You know?
I think the IBMAs possibly helps. I think folks like, you know, Ricky Skaggs and Alison Krauss and folks like that have made bluegrass a bit more acceptable, maybe allowed it, gave it some credentials. You know, Dolly Parton just cut a bluegrass record that really is a bluegrass record. And I think all those kind of things have helped lend some credibility to it.
When you get out there, though, has there been a blending in the scene? Has there been the California hippie thing, the JMB? Does everything go more together?
Well, you know something I have noticed in the last year, maybe not even that long, maybe 6 months to a year, with the current band I work with, the Seldom Scene, I have noticed a lot of like the tie-dye crowd coming out to shows, and I think it's great. And in fact, I'm finding they're familiar with the material. There's a record the Scene recorded in the '70s called "At the Cellar Door." It's a live thing, and all these hippie guys got that listen to it at parties and stuff, which is really cool.
Well, the Scene's a different kind of band, though. And
Right.
They always had that ethos. It's kind of. I was going to ask you about that. Whether if you found it funny playing with the ending up, because the Scene predated the JMB, so
Right.
it's funny playing with the Scene, which in its day, I don't know if people worry about this anymore so much. I don't gather they do, but the Scene was progressive out there band. You were with JMB, now you're with the Scene, kind of going around.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's funny, you know, and I really caught a lot of. There's a lot of talk when I joined the Scene, because it's like, oh, I can't believe this. This is never going to work, you know, because I sort of earned my reputation on, you know, singing hardcore traditional music. In fact, Ducky told me that himself. When I called John about the gig, he said, you know, in his own way, he said, well, I know you can sing bluegrass, but can you sing my stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And I said, well, no, but I'd like to try, you know, that kind of thing. But you know what? I'm not giving myself enough credit, though, because in the years after the JMB, you know, I sung with Hazel Dickens,
Right.
and I toured with Tony Trischka, and had played, you know, done some work with Laurie Lewis, and just did a lot of different kinds of stuff. Because, like I told you earlier when we were talking about, you know, listening to other parts of the Rounder catalog, no, frankly, I didn't in the early days, and when I started to develop a little broader perspective on what the music could be, I also, with that came a new appreciation for a lot of different kinds of music. So I was kind of ready for that.
Really? And what was Trischka doing when you toured with him? I can't keep track.
You know, well, the first time we went to Finland, Tony had some connections in Finland. In fact, there's some really good players over there, and Tony had been over there teaching and touring before, but the problem is that Tony doesn't sing very much. So he thought, well, you know, if we're going to really, you know, bring bluegrass to Finland, we need to have the singing thing going too. And I think this is a song I'm supposed to sing on.
Oh, you want to go see?
I better go.
All right, let me. All right, there we go. Scott's a wonderful guy. He's been very helpful to me. He'd like to be a rock star, sort of in a way. I like him. He's a nice guy. He likes wearing red jackets.
Yeah. He's a good guy.
We were talking about Tony Trischka in overseas.
So that was
Finland?
In Finland.
Yeah.
And we were over there for a couple of weeks. It was really a lot of fun. And the music started as, you know, pretty traditional kind of thing. And then it started to stretch, you know, because Tony's like that. You know, Tony has so much music in him, and he can play it all. He could play Dead on Scruggs, but Tony's thing is Tony will, you know, he'll play a break as he maybe would think Earl Scruggs would approach it, or, you know, and then the next one would just be his own thing, just totally, you know, improvise.
Right.
He's an exciting guy to play with for that reason, because you just never know what's going to come out of him.
You played with. No, I had misunderstood you at first. I thought you played on a bill with him, but you were actually singing in his band.
Yeah, I was in his. I was one of Tony Trishka's bandmates.
Okay, that was just for 2 tours. Is that how?
Well, and then we went to Telluride once with a Sid Straw. You know?
Yeah. She was an ex Golden Palomino singer.
Right.
And did a well-received solo album in the '80s.
Right. And she's great. And we did a record called World Turning, and it, hey Gary, how you doing, bud? We did a record called World Turning, and it was all about like the history of the banjo. There's all kind of stuff on it. We, you know, old time like black minstrel stuff, and classical stuff, and then I did a duet with Alison Krauss on that record, a Fleetwood Mac tune called World Turning.
Okay.
And we toured that, and Sid Straw, you know, and I sang some stuff together. And I really like singing with her. She's a blast, you know.
Yeah, I haven't thought of her in a decade.
Yeah, she's still writing good songs and still putting out good records too.
Yeah. Well, you've traveled kind of a lot of roads. I'm wondering what you think now. Where have you settled, if anywhere? What do you think of this whole traditional, progressive continuum, divide, whatever it stands? I don't think you worry about it too much.
I don't worry about it a lick. I tell you what, I love it. I love it all, and I'm in a really good place. I feel very fortunate to be in 2 bands that are polar opposites.
Yeah.
You know. The Scene, you know, we just did a Scene record, and it's got, you know, Bruce Springsteen songs on it, and Muddy Waters tunes, and a Chuck Berry tune, and but you know, when we do the next Longview record, I wouldn't put that type of thing. I mean, that wouldn't be the approach to take with a Longview record, and that's just dead straight on. That's like J&B kind of stuff in a way, you know.
Now, beyond the liner notes on Longview, I've read the little story in the first. For one thing, how what was put? You talked about a Rounder 25th anniversary concert that was done.
Yeah.
How did that come together?
Well, that was Milton Harkey and Ken Irwin. Milton Harkey, the promoter of that festival, and Ken Irwin. Sort of. I'm not sure if I'm completely right on this. You'd have to double check this with Ken, but I think that they may have done a 25th Rounder anniversary at several festivals around the country that same year. But this particular one was in Denton, North Carolina. And they just invited all these Rounder artists. You know, J.D. was there, and Laurie Lewis, and I think Lynn Morris, and a whole bunch of folks. And the J&B were there, and Hazel. And so we did our show, and then we played with Hazel. And then Ken approached us about, you know, putting different singers together, different kind of, you know, people that normally don't sing together. And James King and I had sang together, but I'd never sang with Don. In fact, I don't think I'd ever met him, unless it was when he was a little kid or something. Yeah. And because he's a young guy, real young guy. And so we did this. We figured, okay, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to do a Stanley Brothers tune, that's for sure, because, you know, all of us were really into that scene, that sound. And we did Angels Are Singing in Heaven Tonight, and where we split, everybody took a different verse, you know, so everybody had a chance to sing lead. And on the choruses, we stacked them with James singing lead, and I did tenor, and Don did the high baritone, and the place went wild. And Ken's back there going, I think I'd like to do something with this, and that's kind of where that whole idea of Longview came from.
Okay, and did Ken produce those sessions? I believe he did, with the band
with
as
Longview,
well. Yeah. And again, was his role kind of the same as you described it earlier, or?
Probably not quite as hands-on. And, you know, when the J&B first started playing, when we first started recording, we probably didn't have the real musical chops to record. We probably weren't ready. Because I listen back to some of those records and go, oh, Lord, you know, it bothers me. But all the guys, and myself included, by the time we did the Longview record, guys pretty much know what their role is and what they need to do. and you know, the timing and all that stuff all worked good. Ken's role in that was more suggesting maybe a arrangement or suggesting a song or not liking a song, and you know, and cutting the song out of the idea, you know, of the list.
Right.
But not quite as hands-on, and because everybody knew if they hit a bad note, you know, got to redo that, got to fix that.
Right. Now, Longview doesn't play out too much, does it?
No, maybe a half dozen dates a year.
Right. Is that? I guess it's by design, but I'm wondering why is that so? How come?
It's logistically, it's hard to pull together because everybody's in different bands, and you know, and if I accept the Longview date, Scene can't work, or Don will get fired from Lonesome River Band if he took too many Longview dates.
Yeah.
So we tread very lightly in booking that band.
Yeah. Okay. How do you deal with a fan nowadays who, I'm trying to think of an example, I didn't write one down, but a fan who may love your music, may love Longview, but what was I talking about with Dick this morning? Kind of guy who wrote a letter to Bluegrass Unlimited because Dolly Parton was on the cover, and they said, God damn it, it may be a great bluegrass record, but it's the only one she's made in 25 years. She's a multimillionaire country star. You know, why put her on the cover? We got to put, Don Rigsby on the cover, or somebody who's, and yet it's a lover of bluegrass. You know, what do you say to a guy like that? Or they might say the same thing if Tony Trischka's on the cover. My God, he's done all these jazzy experimentations. Put a true bluegrasser on our magazine.
I disagree.
What do you say to the guy?
I wouldn't be rude about it, but from a performer standpoint, if Dolly Parton is on a Bluegrass Unlimited record cover, is on a Bluegrass Unlimited cover, and Joe Schmo with a limited interest in bluegrass is walking through Borders books, and he sees Dolly Parton, he says, Dolly Parton, I'm going to read about this. Takes that thing home and sees all these festival ads and record reviews, and seeing that there's a world out there outside of what he hears on the radio every day. Man, it helps us all. I do understand, because I think some bluegrass people feel that they've kind of been shit on, you know, by commercial country music, and had their back, you know, people turn their backs on us and stuff. But I don't think that's a very healthy approach, is to say, you know, we don't want the music to grow, because, you know, that's why the JMB broke up in the first place, because we couldn't make a living. I mean, we can make a living if you know, $15,000 a year is a living, but not in Washington D.C. You know.
Even with the expanded scene, could the JMB make a living now as grown-ups?
I think so. I think so. Yeah, I think the industry has really changed. I think the promoters have kind of come off their wallets a little bit. Ticket prices are higher, but people are still coming. You know, and I also think that the festivals are more professionally organized and put together too, because I remember when the JMB was playing out in the late 70s and early 80s, you know, a cornfield, if you had a cornfield and you had a flatbed truck, you could have a festival. You can't get away with that anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
You got to go to the Zydeco Festival in Louisiana.
Is that right? Is that the way they are?
Yeah.
I'd like to, actually.
Oh, it's stay in the where the hell was it? The Eunice Best Western, 20 minutes away, or the Opelousas Best Western.
You know, I have spent so little time down there, and I love that culture and that food and that music. I really should get down there.
Have you listened to a lot of the traditional Cajun music, or even the experimentations at all?
Not a whole lot, but I've listened to enough of it that I I think it's kind of exciting and fun.
It's another world. Ken take you through it. I mean, he knows it really well.
Yeah.
It's like plopping yourself down into another country in some respects. I mean, just to hear your waiter, who talks perfect English to you, you know, walk back to the kitchen to put in your order and say it in French. It's a weird thing.
Yeah. You know, we toured some. I did a tour with Eddie Lejeune in Russia, and I guess that was like in '90 or something like that. And I loved his singing.
Yeah.
There's a guy who's got a lot of passion.
Yeah.
And Ken told me one time, he's talking about. I was saying, man, what is he singing about? Because he was singing in French. I had no idea. And Ken said, no, you don't want to know. I said, no, really. I said, looks like he's just about to cry. And I know he believes what he's singing. He's saying something about, you know, my dog just died, or you know, something that didn't go with the intensity of the singing at all lyrically.
Right.
I thought it was pretty funny.
Well, it might be there might be some element of emotionalism in the tradition. To hear Ken talk to Dewey Balfa, who I never had a chance to see, he said that Dewey would cry very easily, and he was not a big man, but he could do, you know, he could take apart a truck engine or things like that.
Right.
He'd cry really easily. He'd see Hazel and he'd cry because Hazel was close to his brother and things like that. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of emotionalism.
Yeah.
I think that just comes out of some of the folks there. Are you still at Smithsonian Focus?
No, I left them about a year and a half ago.
Okay. How much of that did you get to listen to? Just about everything. Well, I don't know if you get to listen to everything, but I'm wondering.
I was there for 8 years, and for the first 4 years, all I did was listen to music all day long, every day.
Okay.
And I loved it. I really did love it, and that's why I left, really, because as the label grew and the wheels started turning and we started hiring employees, I knew more about the label than anybody. So I became, instead of being a guy with his hands in the music, I became more of an administrator, and I found that it didn't really work for me that well.
Okay. Did you listen to things like the Pete Seeger political song albums and songs of the unions and stuff like that?
Yeah, all kinds of Woody Guthrie protest stuff, and Phil Oakes, and you know, Dave Van Ronk and all those guys. You know, there's a lot of really powerful material on Folkways.
Yeah, you did the Dave Van Ronk arrangement, I guess. Duncan and Brady.
Well, we actually we kind of twisted it around a little bit.
A little bit. I mean, yeah.
But that's where I got the song.
Right. Yeah, I guess I shouldn't say it was the Dave Van Ronk arrangement.
No, I think Dave Van Ronk would kill you. Somebody told me that they asked Dave Van Ronk what he thought of it, and he hated it. So
well, he's not a bluegrass fan.
Yeah.
I did a long interview with Dave once in another context, and he said, I don't like bluegrass.
Yeah. Yeah.
But why do you think, well, I'll take as a premise of this, that Rounder kind of became the king of the rootsy independents, king or queen, what have you. It's certainly something like Folk Alliance. It's the label that everybody's drawn to, and you've got all. Do you have any thoughts on why they became something different than County became and Rebel became, and even Folkways became? Or Arhoolie. I don't know how much Arhoolie you hear.
Huh. I don't know really. The only thing I could say about that is I think that they maybe had a bit more. Well, now I wouldn't say this is true. Well, no, you know what? I'm not going to say anything.
All right.
You know what? I don't feel comfortable because it'd be hard to say something. I'm also a big fan of Sugar Hill Records.
Yeah.
I like Barry, and I think that he does really great work.
I think Sugar Hill would come in second in my schematic. I think they've superseded what County had done in terms of public perception and getting out there.
I think both of those labels have really kind of used the term again, raised the bar. They came out with really slick, modern-looking covers. I mean, not sellout modern,
right.
but nice, shiny records that if you were flipping through a bin, that record would look like other records. It wasn't like. Now I love County. Don't get me wrong, but their records had a look, real different, distinctive look. And if you were looking for a George Jones record, and you were flipping through and you saw a County record with Uncle Dave's Macon's picture on the cover, you probably wouldn't pick it up, but you might pick up, I don't know, Tony Trischka record or a J&B record, especially some of the later ones, because it looks good, it's catching. And the fact that Rounder had this real kind of a historical slant, telling about all the songs and, history of the band and all that kind of stuff. I would say that all those kind of things contributed to, making Rounder what they are. I gotta feel though that there's probably also all kinds of business stuff that was going on behind the scenes and through various distributors that they've worked with over the years and distributing their own stuff for a while and their mail order company. All that stuff probably contributed.
Right. When you went on, when you started out with them, were you aware of their founding days, which were gone by 1978, 79, the days of the Rounder Collective and that sort of stuff?
Not right off,
Okay.
because we were pretty conservative guys,
Uh-huh.
and that may have scared us. So it's probably best we didn't know. But since I've talked to Ken and I have talked a lot about it actually, and their sort of ideals, and and their approach to to running a business. But I don't know enough about it to comment on it. Really.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Well, they couldn't get anybody to work with them because Scott Billington put it to me. I didn't want to live with them and share my beer. So
Yeah.
they had to-
Yeah. And Ken lived in that house until not so awfully long ago.
Well, Ken still he still spends part time in that house.
Yeah.
I was there in June. Have you seen his new house?
No.
Okay, I was there in June, and Ken he took me to. Well, I was there in June. I was there in October. In October, I didn't get over to the house. In June of last year, he took me over to the house to pick something up before the first day of interviews we were going to do. I sat with him for a long time, as you might imagine, trying to get through sessions and things.
Right.
And he took me to that house first because we were going to sleep at his new house in Newburyport. And I decided later on that even though I wasn't going to sleep in the Somerville house, he wanted me to see it so I'd see the true Ken before he showed me his new house.
Is the new place nice?
It's it's real nice. And he's I shouldn't record this. I mean, hell, I don't need him.